Welcome everyone. It's fantastic that we can be joining you today. My name's Trevor and I'm joined with Craig, and we're going to be talking just about an incredible testimony that the Lord has achieved in Craig's life and just with his business. So Craig, it's a delight to have you join me today.
Thank you.
And before we get cracking with the testimony, why not tell us a bit about yourself, who you are and what business you've been involved in?
Thanks, Trev. I've been in the retail business for the last 28 years. Predominantly in blue chip companies. And then about 15 years ago, I broke away from retail and joined another company. And then probably 8 years ago, I broke away from them and went on my own. And it's been a roller coaster ride since then. So we do retail, we do on-premise, which are restaurants and hotels. And then we also do a bit of private label for the retailers where we produce for them.
So thanks for that background, and you and I have had a lengthy conversation just about an incredible testimony that the Lord has accomplished in your life, in your business, with your family. And to provide a bit of context, you and your wife Julie started attending the business forum about 2 years ago.
That's correct.
And one of the first occasions that you came, you actually received a prophetic word. And I'd love for you just to share, like, how did that make you feel and what was the prophetic word? Because that sets the scene for where we're going.
So Trev, in short, I'm not used to prophetic words. I come from the Baptist background, so it was very foreign to me. But it was Ash, and it was a prophetic word to all the leaders. And it was just like God tugged on my heart. And it was like, the conversation was a one-way conversation directly to me, where Ash took a side plate, and you'll remember he flung it across the auditorium, and everyone was waiting in anticipation for this clang. And it was a clang, but the plate didn't break. And he said, "I believe that God is wanting to take your businesses from a side plate to a serving dish." And I had all sorts of feelings running through my body, emotional ones. What does God want? And I remember driving home, talking to Julie, saying, there was such a great testimony given at the same time. And it was like God just saying, "Craig, I have better things in store for you. You're going to have that serving dish." But Trev, I didn't understand it. I didn't know where to go. I mean, just a very quick one. I did go out and I employed about 15 people, saying, "God, I'm ready to start with my serving dish." But it didn't transpire that quickly. And as I go on, I'll tell you why. But that's really how I felt. And it was from there, what happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Love that. And I think so often when we get a prophetic word, it does cause this discomfort within us, and the Lord starts to work and starts to get things ready for the transition he wants to make. So fast forward 18 months from the time of the prophecy, with the Ash launching the side plate across the auditorium and declaring there's going to be a bigger plate, a serving plate that's going to be coming toward you. We get to July last year during lockdown, where you now had to go through a retrenchment process of people that you hired. You're sitting at the cusp of having to decide, do we close this business?
Yeah.
How did you navigate that time?
Well, Trev, just to go back a step, in the January, I was sitting, or it was Old Year's Eve, I was sitting at home on holiday, and I received an email from one of my largest companies that I represent, telling me that we had done such a great job and thanking me for everything we had done. But they're now going to employ their own people. And I basically lost my biggest account on Old Year's Eve.
Wow.
And it was, "God, what are you doing?" And it was a case of, I don't know what's going on. I've got the serving dish all ready to start serving, and my hands just been taken away from it. And that's how I felt.
Sure.
And from there, we moved forward. And in the March, I got approached by one of the market-leading companies, international company, and they said, "Would you like to pitch for this business?" And I said, "Absolutely." And they said, "No problem. There's just one requirement amongst many, and that was you need to be able to prove that you have a minimum of 25 million rand of working capital to float this business." And I knew I didn't have it. I didn't have the financial depth. I didn't have the balance sheet. And the company that it was being taken away from, I'd previously met probably 2-3 weeks before that. And they had said to me, why don't you come to us? We'll do a merger. You become the CEO of the business, bring all your staff across, and happy days. And it was almost like God saying, this is the path, or so I believed. And from there, I have a wife, as you well know, Julie, my conscience. And she said to me, Craig, I don't believe this is of God. I believe God put you in this business for a reason, and that is to serve people, give people a safe place. And that's not what you're going to be doing. You're looking after yourself. And I remember after a service on a Sunday, I think it was Sunday evening, Judy said to me, we're just going to go speak to Trevor quickly. And Judy said to Craig, Trev, you need to speak to this man. He needs some help and some guidance. And we met the following week. And Trevor, I'll never forget, you took a piece of paper and you wrote down that we go between certain places when we make decisions, and there are pros and cons. And that's where we move between what those pros and cons were. And you very quickly highlighted to me that there's a vision and what is your mission, okay? And that kind of turned me a little bit upside down. And it didn't quite give me the answer I was looking for, because I was hoping that it would be scripted in terms of do this. And it wasn't. And I went home and I told Julie, and Julie said, well, it's very clear. You're not to do a merger. And I said, Julie, I'm about to retrench people. I think I need to do a merger. And Trev, we always talk about the 60 days, because what happened, what God did in 60 days is an absolute miracle in God's favor. And what had happened is we pitched for the business. We didn't give the financial depth of the business. COVID was happening. Decisions had to be made quickly. And all of a sudden, our discussion stopped with this other company. And long story short is they actually shut their doors.
Sure.
From being like a $1 billion business. And they shut their doors, and we were awarded the contract with not really giving too much information.
Yeah.
Just that I knew the person and we'd worked on the brand before. And from lockdown to signing of the contract was 60 days.
Wow.
That's how quickly God moved. And when that business got shut down and we were awarded the contract, it wasn't that God opened doors. God kicked doors down. And the impossible became very possible. And my blinkers were taken off. And I believe that God took me to a place at the beginning of lockdown. And that was, I got sick. And I was very sick. I mean, I was bedridden for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it brought me to a place where I didn't have a quiet time with God once a day. They were continual. And it was just like God silenced my heart.
Sure.
And said, just wait on me. I know what's going on.
Wow.
And I didn't know what it was going to be, because retrenching people is not fun. It's horrible, especially when you have a plan that you believe God has given you.
Yeah.
So that's really what happened. And we awarded the contract. And just one very salient point is that to be awarded a contract, we pitched for this contract 6 years prior. And they wanted 20 million rand to buy the contract.
Yeah.
That's how big the brand is. And we lost it. And strangely enough, we had the financial depth because we had shareholders. And they were prepared to put 50 million up front for working capital, and that was the requirement, 20 million to buy the business. And yeah, we were awarded a contract. We didn't pay a cent on a business that had been paid 20 million, and we were awarded this contract.
Wow.
So God's favor and miracles, and there were two songs that were really relevant for me over this time. There was Waymaker
Yeah.
and The Blessing, and I heard them all the time.
Wow.
And the other thing that happened in April is my partner in the business landed up with cancer, bladder cancer. I have not seen my partner in over a year, or just short of a year, face to face. So it's just miraculous. But God has just taken us through all these bumps,
Yeah.
and it's been favor.
I loved what you said there, and I want to come back to the people that are listening. Is you had this promise, you thought you knew how it was going to be fulfilled. All these different options came which you could have pursued, which weren't God's agenda. You then had experienced all of these challenges, your partner picking up cancer, who was key in the financial aspect of the business, yourself being bedridden for 2 weeks, having to lay people off, having challenges with shareholders, all of these things. But I loved what you said is God had to quieten your heart. And if you're listening right now, I want to encourage you to consider where you're at and to allow the Lord to quieten your heart, because there is a testimony that comes out of this. So just to give an overview, in these 60 days, your business went from nearly shutting down to 1,000% increase.
Yeah.
In your portfolio and in what you were handling. That's 1,000%. That's not 100%, that's 1,000%.
Correct.
And just because of time, and I know we spoke on this for 2 hours, if you had to pick 4 or 5 like key moments where just, in your words, God kicked down doors, what were those moments? Just to show people that God can turn what seems impossible into the possible.
Sure, Trev. Only 5. Well, Trev, firstly, we bought our shareholders out, okay, and that was absolutely amazing at a fraction of the cost that we should have paid. So that was the first big obstacle that we overcame. The second one was, being awarded the contract. But I think for me, and I might be jumping the gun, but I know we're short of time. For me, the big thing was spending time in God's Word, okay, and knowing what God actually wanted, okay, because I didn't know. I knew there was a promise, but I didn't know how it was going to be fulfilled. And I had to step back and just wait to hear from God. And the hearing from God is not an audible hear. It is paths being made, things being shifted.
Yeah.
And how you just see God's divine power just pushing things aside and saying, just rest in me. I know what I'm doing. And that for me was absolutely incredible, because I'd never sensed that before.
Yeah.
I'd had these prophetic words. I had no idea what they meant. And I just had to be faithful. But that being said, Trev, one of the other things that I very quickly learned, and Ash touched on it, I think 3 services ago, is prophetic words. They're not there to be put on a shelf.
Yeah.
They're there to be actioned. And when they're not actioned and they're put on a shelf, Satan comes in and he drives a wedge that they will not be taken off the shelf.
Sure.
And it's only when you actually take it off the shelf and start doing something with those words,
Yeah.
and letting them become action. And that for me was just incredible.
Wow.
How when Ash spoke about it, it was like, yeah, I had to actually do something. I had to actually move forward. So many people have a prophetic word and they sit back and they wait for God. And there's a time and place where, yes, you do sit and you allow God to move. But there's also a time where God expects you to move your first foot forward.
Yeah.
And actually start moving forward. And that for me was, we need to listen to God.
Yeah.
And if God has given you a word, my gosh, listen.
Yeah.
Take heed.
I love what you're saying there. And I remember being in a conference where someone spoke around faith and actioning faith. And they said faith has 2 aspects to it. It's proclamation, so actually declaring what the promises of God are, what those prophetic words are, but then also preparation.
Yeah.
So preparing and getting ready so that when that word comes to fruition, you're in a place where it can actually be outworked in your life, which is what you're saying, which is wonderful.
Trev, coupled to that, the other thing that I found incredible was seek wise counsel, all right? And people become hermits. They don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And I was a hermit. And I was able to actually talk to you. And by talking to you, you actually just gave different perspective. And what I'd like to say to all the men and ladies, if you're married, pray for each other. I've got a wife who is absolutely amazing, Trev, and she prayed.
Yeah.
And she walked every step of the way. She is my biggest supporter.
Yeah.
And she supported me. And I see so often how wives will discredit their husbands, or husbands will discredit their wives. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Encourage and walk the road with them.
So I know, and we're running out of time here, but there were so many obstacles. There were process obstacles, there were financing obstacles, there were compliance obstacles, all of these different obstacles. And at each point, the Lord just miraculously opened doors to, during lockdown, when you eventually got this contract. Tell us a bit about like how you had budgeted what your revenue was going to be from the project, and how it was just overshot each month.
So Trev, if you look at very simplistically, let's say we were budgeted 14 million a month for turnover. In August, which is our first trading month, we did in 20 million. And the second month, we did 20 million. And the third month, we did 19.7 million. And so it went. So much so that the deficit that was there for the year from the previous agent, we actually made up. And we ended up showing a 34% growth over the previous year, which was unheard of.
So I just want to pause there, and it's with specific reference. God has got promises for us. He's got plans for us. We need to push through the bumpy roads. But when those promises come through in the most unexpected means, even if we could say this was a time of famine in the land, and God didn't only come through with the contract, but then what was expected, he exceeded by 34%, which is huge.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is stirring courage in people's hearts. Hopefully this is opening up those doors to be trusting God again. Hopefully it's them pulling the prophetic words off of the bookshelves. If you have to leave the people listening to this with just one aspect of encouragement for their situations, you've known what it means to be a business owner during COVID times. You've known what it means to almost have to shut down the doors of your business. What encouragement would you like to leave with people today?
Trevor, it's actually a verse. And that verse is Proverbs 16, verse 9. Because that verse, for me, basically got me through this. And that is, with your heart, you make plans for the future, but the Lord chooses your steps. And that for me was, we can decide what we want, but ultimately God decides on those steps that we take. And that for me was just reassuring, is that regardless of what I'm thinking, he will ultimately control the steps. And it's either we're going to have a bumpy road, or we're going to have a road where we allow God to be in control. And it was a hard road for me. Okay, those prior days, January to June, July, they were horrific, Trev. That was terrible. And I just want to say to everyone, don't lose hope. Keep your eyes focused on God and His promise. He will never let us down.
Wonderful.
And just remain faithful.
So hopefully you're feeling encouraged having listened to this. And we do want to say we are praying for our business folk. We are praying for God to just bring breakthrough. But as Craig says, we each have choices. So make the right choice, stay faithful, and keep trusting the Lord for your breakthrough. Thank you so much.
Thank you.